Before we proceed to our lesson 3, let's have a recap on our previous lesson. We learned about expressionism, is a term that, like impressionism, originated in the visual arts. And learned about, who is Arnold Schoenberg, is one of the most influential composers of the 20th century. Now, let's proceed to our lesson 3. The other style of music in the 20th century. Electronic music is literally made with electronic instruments. The category of electronic music can best be understood in contrast to the categories of acoustic or traditional music, like classical, jazz, and folk. Early electronic music. The Russian musician and inventor Leon Theremin invented the theremin in 1920. Theremin is an instrument that creates electromagnetic field that creates sounds at different pitches when the musician moves their hands around the theremin, and creates a high warbling sound, most famous for its use in 1950s horror and science fiction movies. During the 1930s and 1940s, a number of inventors developed different versions of the synthesizer. These electronic instruments were originally intended to replicate the sounds of organs or other traditional instruments. In 1950s and 1960s, the highly creative Canadian musician Bruce Hack started making electronic music that was originally intended for children. 1960s Robert Moog began producing his famous line of synthesizers that revolutionized the field of electronic music. Moog synthesizers are still widely used today. Musical machines and the birth of disco. Synthpop and disco, the 1970s. In the 1970s, electronic music began to have a significant influence on popular music, with the adoption of polyphonic synthesizers, electronic drums, drum machines and turntables, through the emergence of genres such as disco, krautrock, new wave, synthpop, hip-hop and EDM. The synth era, the 1980s. In the 1980s, electronic music became more dominant in popular music, with a greater reliance on synthesizers, and the adoption of programmable drum machines. In the early 1980s, digital technologies for synthesizers, including digital synthesizers, became popular, and a group of musicians and music merchants developed the Musical Instrument Digital Interface (MIDI). Bands like a-ha, Pet Shop Boys, and Depeche Mode combined the arrangement of rock music with the new sounds made possible by MIDI, or Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Dance music, the 1990s. The 1970s marked the beginning of the modern dance music, and the 1980s marked its marketable development, but it wasn't until the 1990s that electronic music grew into the massive genre it is today. The 1990s was also the first decade in which electronic music composition became something anyone could use. The popularity of personal computer or PC resulted in the creation of new software like Fruity Loops aimed at home users. The EDM era, 2000 to today. Since 2000, electronic dance music, EDM, has grown from a popular genre into an influential part of all mainstream music. At the same time, genres like dubstep and trance have influenced the structure of mainstream pop music. From Taylor Swift to Justin Bieber, many of today's most popular pop artists have implemented aspects of dubstep, house, and trance into their singles. The internet and electronic music. Part of the huge growth of electronic music can be attributed to the internet. The development of social websites like YouTube and SoundCloud has made promoting and finding new music to millennials listeners. It's also made promoting music easy. New artists that would have had to find their own distributors or sign record deals decades ago can share their music via social networks and distribute it using outlets like Beatport and iTunes. The internet has also made producing electronic music easier than ever before. The availability of applications like FL Studio, Ableton Live, and Logic Pro gives anyone the ability to become an electronic music producer if they'd like to. Chance or aleatoric music involves the use of chance in either the composition or performance of the piece. John Cage became a prominent promoter of aleatoric techniques, even going so far as to use them in lectures as well as musical compositions. Aleatoric music came from the Latin word alea, meaning dice. Aleatoric is a music in which some element of the composition composed work's realization is left to the determination of its performers. The term is most often associated with procedures in which the chance element involves a relatively limited number of possibilities. The reason that people would listen to this genre of music is because of its randomness. Composing aleatoric music means leaving some element of chance to determine the outcome. Aleatoric music does not follow the same guidelines as that of classical music. Types of indeterminate music. 1. The use of random procedures to produce a determinate, fixed score. 2. Mobile form. And 3. Indeterminate notation. including graphic notation and texts. The first group includes scores in which the chance element is involved only in the process of composition, which means that every parameter is fixed before the artist's performance. In John Cage's Music of Changes in 1951. For example, the composer selected duration, tempo, and dynamics by using the Qing, an ancient Chinese book which prescribes methods for arriving at random numbers. On the level of detail, Ioannis Xenakis used probability theories to define some microscopic aspects of Pithepracta 1955 to 1956, which is Greek for actions by means of probability. This work contains 4 sections, characterized by textural and timbre attributes, such as glissandi and pizzicati. At the microscopic level, the sections are designed and controlled by the composer while the single components of sound are controlled by the mathematical theories. Now, be ready for our Red Day schedule. Thank you and have a great day.